What's up? In this tutorial, we are going to cover how to export Foliage from SpeedTree into Unreal Engine using Pivot Painter Wind. We're going to be using a plugin to extract the Pivot Painter data from our SpeedTree plants. They could work with all kinds of plants, trees, bushes, grass. We're going to be extracting that data using a plugin and setting up our materials inside of Unreal Engine to achieve our Pivot Painter Wind. Pivot Painter, if you're not familiar, is a way of storing the pivot information for different areas of your mesh in a texture. That allows us to achieve a much more high quality looking wind result because we can move different parts of our mesh in sequence, allowing us not to just wiggle our whole tree in the wind, but wiggle different parts of it. We can have the branch have a slight wind, and then we can have the individual leaves have a much stronger wind. It just gives us a lot more flexibility and lets us create a much more realistic looking effect. If you're completely new to SpeedTree, I will link a little quick start guide below to get you up and running, or if you'd like to go deeper and learn how to create interactive foliage and other environment art topics, I cover all of that in a lot more detail in Asial Art Academy, in which I help you build AAA level environments with courses, coaching, and custom tutorials designed for you and your projects. If you're interested in that and working a little more closely with me, you can find a link to that in the description. All right, let's get into it. I've set up this banana plant here. It's a good example because it is not super complicated, and yet it is a kind of plant that really benefits from this kind of pivot point wind, because each of these fronds and big leaves here, if we didn't use Pivot Painter, they would just kind of like all wiggle together, and you wouldn't get this beautiful feeling like each one is getting separately blown about with the wind. So this is like a really great example of a tree that benefits from Pivot Painter Wind. Okay, to export this for use in Pivot Painter, all we have to do is come to File and Export Mesh, or you can use Control E as well. In the export settings, first thing I'm going to do here is come and click on the VFX option. And then we're going to come to export. File type is this universal scene description, or .usd. This is kind of like a universal file format that works amongst different 3D packages, not specific to SpeedTree or Unreal Engine. And the particular plugin that we're going to use to import Pivot Painter information uses the USD to convert that information. Okay, we're going to choose grouping by hierarchy, and the hierarchy level we're going to choose number 9. This is going to group the objects by their hierarchy, which you might imagine is what is needed for the Pivot Painter setup. Next, we're going to just make sure that we turn off include variations. We can turn off wind and growth here under animation because Pivot Painter is going to just be set up as a separate system, so we don't really need that. Lastly, we want to make sure we don't have skip texture save turned on. That's something that we need to have checked off like this. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and hit export. Now this is going to prompt us to save this somewhere. I'll save a second one here. So I'll call this banana plant example. Go ahead and hit save. This is going to go ahead and export everything. This is very dependent on the complexity of your tree that you're exporting. So mine's pretty fast here, but that's just because it's a smaller sized plant here and there's not too many leaves and things going on. So I've gone ahead and exported it. That's great. Now I can close SpeedTree. All right, so I'm now in my Unreal Engine project, and we need to go ahead and grab the plugin and install it to our engine. I'm gonna come over here to the Fab button and jump into the Fab Marketplace. And what I'm gonna type in here is IG Tools PP with no spaces. That is the fastest way to get to this plugin. We're gonna come and grab this plugin here. We're gonna purchase it and install it to engine. I believe it's fairly cheap. When we have gone ahead and installed it to our engine, we need to just come up here to the edit and the plugin section. We want to type in IG Tools, and we want to enable this IG Tools BP. Now that's the plugin that's going to go ahead and read that USD data into our level and construct a Pivot Painter setup for it. So we'll go ahead and hit restart now. Okay, so you want to go into an empty level here, because when it import the USD version of the tree, not the pivot painter version, but the USD version, is going to just drop it into the level that you have open. I'm not sure exactly why it works that way, but that's how it is in my testing. So I'm going to make sure I'm in an empty level. I'm going to make a new folder. I'll call this SpeedTree. And in that folder, I will make a new folder for the banana plant. Once we have that plugin enabled in our project, we can come up here to the file dropdown, and there's an import SpeedTree USD option. We click on that, it's going to bring up this window here. Now, this is where we go and grab the USD that we just exported from SpeedTree. So we'll go and hit this button, import USD. A bunch of windows are going to pop up, and this is the choose file window. So we're going to go and navigate to the plant that we exported. So I'll choose this second one here. And when you do this, it's going to bring up a second window here that is the USD stage editor. Now, the USD stage editor is just going to pop up in the side here. This is what's reading the USD information. And so you don't really need to worry about this. Just have it over to the side as you're doing this import. Another thing you'll notice here is that in our level, we now have a blueprint here with the plant. Now, this is not the plant with the actual pivot painter information applied. And you'll notice in our content browser here, there is a new USD assets folder. And this has all the, I guess, meshes and textures associated with the USD file. This is not what we're going to be using for the pivot painter plant, but this has to come along as the information that's used in the converter. Just wanted to mention that. It can be confusing. You can think, oh, I did already export my plant, it imported okay, but you'll notice that there's not actually any movement to the plant. That's because we haven't actually converted it yet to the pivot painter type plant. Okay, so we'll come back here to the import USD option. This is where we're going to actually do the conversion. So if we come to the base name, we need to give it a name, and I'll call it banana plant. And we need to choose the path that we want to save this file to in our content browser. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the dots here, and we'll navigate towards the folder I just made, SpeedTree banana plant, and click on there. Now it's going to save into that folder. Great. Okay, so this little levels mapping section here is where we choose how to divide the hierarchy of our tree or our plant. And so every checkbox that you enter is going to be a second pivot point, or third. And we can go up to 4. So we can't have more than 4 levels of pivot points. Right now we have a main trunk pivot point. I'm gonna make a branch pivot point by adding a checkbox. So the main trunk, and then we have our branches. Now they will be kind of rotating separate. And then we have our banana leaf fronds. If we had leaves that were not fronds, we might check this on, and that would actually have the leaves themselves fluttering separately too. Since we have this particular plant, the fronds and the branches are kind of the same object. So they're kind of, the frond is on either side of the branch, and the branch moving, and they're moving together in the case of the banana plant. And so in that case, I'm gonna not choose to make a new pivot point for the fronds, because that would make the leaf and the core of the leaf, that's the branch, kind of separate and move separately. This will make more sense in context here. We're going to turn on Nanite, which is great that it's something by default. Next thing I want to look here at is the output mesh over here. So this is basically how to tell it how to separate the mesh. So these are the pivots of the pivot painter animation, but these letters here are the number of meshes, or the separation of meshes that we're going to have. So if I added a B here for the branches and fronds, I would get a separate mesh for those. Normally, I don't actually want these as separate meshes, but you know, occasionally you might have a situation where you want them to be separate. Maybe you have a tree with vines on it, and you kind of, for like purposes of wanting to hide it on certain options, or show it based on, you know, what kind of tree you have, you might want to have them as separate meshes so you could turn it on and off. In my case, I'm going to keep them all as the same mesh, and so they'll be all mesh A. Okay. We want to keep Nanite on, preserve volume. Let's see, anything else here? Okay, so the material settings. Now this is something that doesn't work as well as it should about this plugin. I think it may have broken in the updates from 5.4 to 5.6, which is what I'm using here to test, maybe. But these basically are the type of material you'd like to build for yourself for the plant. it's layer based with virtual textures or no virtual textures, or UDIM based, which basically means we'll use one material and divide the textures into UDIMs. Now, this would be great in theory, but for some reason this converter is not converting your textures correctly for the UDIM layer and also for the layers for non-virtual and virtual textures. So we're going to need to choose one of them and then make some modifications to our material actually to get it to work better with our textures. So I don't know, maybe that'll be fixed at some point. You can test it, but or maybe in earlier versions of the engine this isn't broken, but we're going to choose no virtual textures for now, and I'll show you what I mean in a minute. Okay, so we'll go ahead and hit process. Now this could take a long time depending on how big your tree is. It could take 10 minutes or 20 minutes if you have a really complicated tree. For me, and how I recommend you just test this to get comfortable with it, is just kind of this simpler tree setup, and so it's really fast. But just wanted to mention that if you feel like either when you connect your USD here at the beginning or during the processing section, it might hang for a while, and that you kind of just have to leave it and let it do its thing. Okay, so I'll pull these over to the side. Hey, just wanted to jump in here and let you know that I have a free gift for you. If you are wanting to build really high quality Unreal Engine environments, especially natural environments, I'm giving away my landscape material for free. This is a fully featured landscape auto material and landscape layer material. It's the one I use now on all my projects. I'm really proud of this material. It's a very fully featured asset that can expand and contract in a very modular way to the complexity of your project. I've included all kinds of features like nanite displacement, auto beach layers, auto snow layers. All of the layers are blended using real height information to create a really realistic look. There's also runtime grass, either using the traditional grass system or PCG. It also completely takes care of the tiling texture problem with a bunch of different features that break up your textures. I've also built in a really streamlined footstep sound system using data assets that you can very easily drag and drop your sounds for your footsteps into, and reads off the physical material of the surface that you are on. As a bonus, I know sometimes when we download assets off the marketplace, it can be very confusing to integrate them into our projects because everybody thinks about things differently, has different organization styles. So I want to make sure that it's as streamlined a process for you to pick up this material and start using as possible. So I've included a free mini course that comes with the material and teaches you about every single feature and how to use it, how to implement it in your own project. If you're interested, just head to the link below to the page and enter your email, and a link to the download page will be sent to you by email. And if you ever have any feature requests or questions, just let me know. Enjoy. And we're going to delete this guy, USD based plant. We're going to come over to the folder we made, SpeedTree, banana plant, and these are what we have exported. So we have a single mesh, and if we drag that in, we can actually see that it is moving, and it's moving correctly. Now, the way we control the wind for these meshes is using this material layer instance. So it comes in here, the folder. We have our three materials, which in my case are bark, leaf, and peeling bark. And then it's made this material instance for us here. So if I double click on that to open it, you can see that that has all the wind settings. I come over to wind 1 or 2 or 3. These correspond to the pivot painter hierarchical things we set up. So 1 is the main trunk, 2 is the branches connected to the trunk, 3, if we had leaves, would be the leaves, and so on. So that's what these numbers correspond to. And so if you're not using 3 and 4, you could go ahead and unactivate them, which would give you a slightly simpler material. Actually, let's go ahead and do that because we're only using the main trunk and the branches. So we'll go ahead and disable those. Okay, so let's look at these wind settings here. The two ones that I usually play with here are the max rotation and the local wind frequency. These tend to give me the most control over kind of how the wind looks. And you can see there's some other things here like random rotation influence and radius multiplier and things that will kind of help with the look of the wind. But here, let's just kind of focus on the max rotation, which is basically what it sounds like. It's the max movement that this step in the wind can take, or this branch or whatever can take. And so if we up that to 1, you can see it's gonna go a lot further based on the wind. And if we increase the wind frequency to 1, now you can see it's blowing, you know, quite a bit more. Okay, let's take a look at the the second level wind, so the wind number 2, we come to the frequency and we up that to 1, and the max rotation up to 1 as well. Now we can see our branches actually rotating and moving, which is awesome. I might change this to be maybe max rotation 1 and local frequency 1 on the second branches, and maybe wind frequency 1 and max rotation 0.2 on the main trunk. So that means the main trunk is a little more stable, but the fronds here are giving a little more rotation to the wind. And this is something that could be, you know, adjusted dynamically as you need. Our mesh is moving correctly with the wind. However, there's no textures. So now we have to come over here to our materials and fix them. So the way this material is set up by default is that it uses packed textures, and the way it packs them is diffuse and roughness. So the color in the RGB channels and the roughness in the alpha channel of one texture, and the other one is a normal map, occlusion, and then displacement packed separately. I believe the way this is supposed to work is that it's supposed to export your textures for you and pack them for you, and so that they show up here as packed textures, but that's not happening in the version that I'm testing. And so we have two options: either pack our textures that came in here in the USD assets. We have our textures here. So we have the option to take these and pack them ourselves, or modify this material to accept more textures. For me personally, I prefer to use more textures when I can instead of packing them, because then I have to pack them for every single plant that I end up importing, and I prefer to just fix this master material once that's being used for these imported plants and then use my normal textures that I have. But that's totally up to you, and you might want to get the efficiency out of using fewer textures. So let's go ahead and modify this master material to accept more textures. I'm going to double click on this tree layered here. The tree layered, we're going to come over here to where it says trunk and leaves. This is how the material is set up. You're either a trunk material or a leaf material. What I'll come over and do is duplicate this DR texture, which is the texture input, and I will call the first one color, and the second one I will call roughness. And then I'll come down here to the leaves, and we will go ahead and do the same thing. Copy and paste the leaf DR. We'll call the first one color, and the second one roughness. Great. That is how to make the texture inputs. And so if we save, those texture inputs won't show up yet in our material instance, but that's because they're not plugged into anything yet. So what we need to do is go ahead and plug these into the function here that is processing these materials here. We'll come in here to the trunk material first, and this is basically how it's set up. We have the texture input here. This is the input here under the albedo roughness input. All we got to do is just copy and paste this input here for this material function, and I'll rename these again. I'll call it trunk color. This one I'll call trunk roughness. Then I will come and grab this texture sample and copy and paste it, plug the texture into the incoming input for roughness, and the UVs into the same place, which is this up here, this input UVs. And then we can go ahead and we could grab the R value from our roughness texture, which would work just fine. Next, we will go to the trunk roughness and plug it into the material function we just updated. And now we go ahead and have a roughness input for our texture. Next, we'll come down and do the same thing to our leaves material function. So I'll come over here and double click on that to open it. And we'll come in here and do the same thing. I'll make a new input, and the first one we'll call color, and the second one we will call roughness. And I'll copy and paste the texture sample, plug the UVs up here to get the same UVs and the texture into the new texture input, and the roughness will now come from the red channel. Oh, right. All right, let's go ahead and save and then come back up. And now we have a new roughness input for the leaves, and we'll plug that into the new leaves input roughness. Okay. I could go ahead and do that same process for the normal map input. The normal map input, if we come back in here, is grabbing the red and green channels basically of the normal map, and it's just using just a blue color as the blue channel, because technically that never changes in a normal map. It's red, green, and then the blue is a constant. That's how a normal map is set up. We could go ahead and just use this normal map input and make some other texture inputs exactly the same as we just did. I think this is good enough for me for now, but I think you can probably extrapolate how to make additional texture inputs for this material. So let's come back to our material instance and save our master material here. And then we should see additional, okay, so now we have an additional roughness input. Now let's go ahead and import our textures. Now, when we export the USD from SpeedTree, it gives us some of the textures, but not all of them. So for example, it gives me gloss instead of roughness. It does give me the normal map, which is great, but I end up needing to come back here and come to my SpeedTree folder and import my textures that I used in SpeedTree anyway, and probably I'll get better quality. Anyway, so I'll go and hit import, and I'm just gonna look for my textures I imported. For me, it was the banana leaves. So I'll grab the color, the roughness, and the normal. And these are textures that I got straight off of Fab, nothing special about them. And then I'll go ahead and import the bark as well. So color, normal, and roughness. So now we can go ahead and start replacing the textures. So I have the leaf, and I can drag in my color for the leaves, my normal map, and my roughness. There we go. That's set up. Now I can just come back to the bark here and use the same textures here for the bark. Color, normal, roughness, save. And I think I'm missing one material here, which is the peeling bark here. Connect up those as well. I want to mention one pitfall here is that when we import our roughness textures, often they're imported, unfortunately, incorrectly. They're imported with sRGB turned on. So we're going to double click on those textures, come over to sRGB and turn that off. Hit save, which is going to give us more correct roughness information from that texture. I'll do it to the other roughness texture I imported as well. So for me, I'm going to open up the material instance for the leaves, and we'll go ahead and I'm going to come to the roughness, and I want to come to the roughness min and max and lower the roughness min to 0 and the roughness max to 0.5. Rubbery looking, and then we can continue to tweak. I might lower the brightness of or increase the contrast maybe of the leaves, to darken them, lower the brightness to 0.8 just to make them look a little more realistic. Other thing you can play around with is by default, it's going to automatically choose what type of material each part of the plant is, and occasionally it's wrong. In this case, it is thinking that this is a trunk and not a leaf, because you remember when we looked in the material, there's those two types, and we actually want this to be a leaf material because that's going to have translucency to it. So we'll turn off this is a trunk option here under the material type, and unfortunately we'll have to just drag our textures in again because it's different texture inputs. So normal and roughness, but you can see now there's a subsurface option. If we come to the subsurface, I'm actually going to do my color control things again. I'm going to increase the contrast 1.2, lower the brightness to 0.8. Maybe let's lower the saturation to 0.8 too. Maybe lower the brightness even more. Okay. All right. So now you can see that there's actually some translucency going on with the leaves, which makes them not look so, the shadows look so black, which doesn't quite look correct on foliage. So we can come over to the subsurface controls as well. If you wanted to increase the brightness of the subsurface, that's something you would need to go ahead and tweak. There we go. That looks great. Now, if you want to control all of the foliage in your level, for example, we have a bunch of these plants and other plants maybe that I've imported. They're all pointing different directions. We want to control them all globally. For example, we want to control the angle of the wind, and we want to control the strength of the wind over everything. There's a material parameter collection that comes with this that lets us do that. I'm going to come over here to the engine folder and click on it and search MPC. This is going to bring up MPC Wind, which comes with the IG Tools content that comes with it. So I'll double click on that to open it. And here we have a material parameter collection that lets us control the wind speed and the wind degrees. So if we go ahead and increase this to 1, you can see that's blowing them all really strong. And if we change the angle in degrees, it's now rotating them around different angles. And this could be very easy for us to set up. You can put a blueprint into your level where you get to the actor's rotation and use it to set this default value here for the angle of the wind. That's one way you could do it, or you could just do this programmatically, but this is a good way to control all of the wind in your level at once. It's very adaptable. All right, so that's how you export SpeedTree to Unreal Engine using Pivot Painter to set up the wind. This works on all kinds of different plants, not just banana plants, trees. It works on individual leaf animations. So it's super versatile and gives you just much better looking wind. I mean, this could be used for grass as well. It just looks a lot better than the kind of wiggling world position offset that we're used to seeing on most of these foliage assets. Hopefully that helps you navigate some of the weird pitfalls and peculiarities of this particular tool. If I come across other plugins and tools that make this a little bit easier, I will go ahead and share those. For the moment, this is the plugin that I found that actually works. So I'll keep you up to date on that, but let me know how this goes for you, and I will see you in the next one.